So you're opening up to a population of about 2 billion people, and the process, it's about the same, and the pricing is about the same. You're going to provide access in a meaningful way without having to disrupt anything in your business.
Welcome to the GOAT Podcast. I'm your host, Steve Cassinan. At GOAT, we define sustainability through the lens of intentionality, circularity, and community. With this framework, any problem can be solved. The stories that we share, the pioneers that we talk to, show us a different way to build the future we all want to have.
We're at a pivotal moment where nuclear is needed more than ever. Let's once and for all become a circular economy.
Waste is not cost neutral. Like, it always costs your business something. So if you can get rid of that, then that's good for business as well.
There's this dissonance. We talk a really good game about protecting the ocean, but the purchase decisions that we make don't match with our espoused values.
An ideal food system revolves around relationship. Where is my food coming from? Who's growing it? How is it being grown? And why does that matter?
Thanks for being here. Let's dive into the conversation. I'd love to just start with learning a little bit more about what your background has been. Have you kind of always been in Florida? What's kind of been the journey for you?
Yeah, so I moved around a little bit as a kid. I was born in Massachusetts, so all of my rooting interests as far as sports and that sort of thing are from Massachusetts. But settled down in South Florida right before I started high school. Spent a year studying in Israel, and then 2 years at Yeshiva University in New York. I played some college basketball there, and then came back and finished at FIU here in South Florida, and then met my wife. We got married, and we've been in South Florida ever since. And so, from a professional standpoint, really kind of focused on business development. I've always been a connector. How do we take puzzle pieces and put them together in a way that's really meaningful for both parties, right? Like to say, okay, here's what you're doing, here's what you're doing. How do we figure out how we match make and find opportunities for everybody to be successful together? And so that's kind of what I've done professionally. I know it's getting a little loud in here. If you want me, oh, you can hear it. Okay, that's good. Okay, so always been a connector in that regard, and so I've done a bunch of different things in the startup world. Early in my career, worked for a law firm that we turned from a 10-person boutique real estate law firm into what's now the fourth largest firm of its kind in the state. So I've always sort of had an eye for the strategy side of things, and then also figuring out how the business development angles need to be married into that. And so I've done that in a number of different startups. Worked with a company called Spring Big in the loyalty space, was employee number 3 there, and helped develop that into now their status as a public. They went public a couple of years ago, and when I heard about the CH opportunity, I jumped on board because I saw the opportunity to develop a business that really had, very little in terms of foundation, huge in terms of opportunity, and the ability to come on board and say, how do we build this into something really exciting, spoke to me.
I mean, that's not super common though, that somebody just goes right into kind of high risk startups from the beginning and really finding scale with a lot of those companies. What got you down that path? Just as were you interested in kind of putting puzzle pieces together as a young kid? How did that work?
My parents would tell you, if they were on this podcast right now, that I was like terrible at Legos. Like it takes a certain kind of mind, I guess, to not even be good at Legos. Like I struggled completely with the concept, not of like what to build. Like, I didn't want to follow the instructions, So if we didn't have the instructions, it was like, here's a whole world to play with, and I'm like, well, what do you want me to do exactly? And they were like, well, just build something, and I'm like, well, exactly what do you want me to build? And so I did not get a natural start in that regard. That wasn't my thing. I liked putting puzzles. I took the LSATs because I thought it would be interesting. I thought I might go to law school, but I really enjoyed taking the test. I always enjoyed taking tests. I don't know what bucket you put someone in, what the category is for someone who likes taking tests, but I always did. I liked the challenge of it, and I also sort of always saw things in terms of the logistics of what needs to be done. but also sort of that I felt it's sort of the mission. I felt like spiritually, it's our mission in another way to repair the planet, right? Not just through sustainability, but like matchmaking and helping people kind of get from whatever station they're at right now to the next station that they're supposed to go to, right? So like we don't expect kids to come out of school fully formed and totally educated in every potential aspect. They have to start with an elementary school or kindergarten, and they go to elementary school and a middle school and then a high school and then college and whatever their path is to learn, right? And we all have to be lifelong learners in that way. So and I've always tried to keep my eyes open to as many possibilities to figure out how do we help the people in our network? How can we help them get to where they need to go? That's just sort of always been my mentality, I guess.
That's a really cool approach, and I think that I don't know, when you start to approach things that way, it kind of changes the perspective of why you're doing what you're doing. Like especially when you're purpose driven, it's kind of becomes clear around what the mission is. But I also think like part of this is I think the human desire, I guess, to always better whatever the situation is. I feel we've always tried to do that, but we're living in a time now where technology and everything is moving so quickly. I feel like there's so many opportunities to, kind of go down a path of figuring out a better way to do something. What kind of landed you in what you did now? Because even taking one pass saying, "Hey, I want to help people," that's great, but there's a lot of different areas where that happens. So what kind of drew you to where you're at now?
It's interesting. One of the concepts you spoke about on a previous episode of your podcast was this idea of preservation via innovation, or using the idea of we want to preserve, but doing it through innovative methodology. And so I've always been drawn to people who have unique ideas, interesting IP, doing something that's transformative in that way, and and knowing that everybody's got their own skill sets, and it's about knowing what you know and what you don't know. And so for a lot of founders that have innovative, intellectual property or have been working on some problem and have a really unique solution for it, they're great at that component of it, but they may not have the business development skill set. They may struggle to raise capital. They may struggle from a sales or marketing perspective. And so I've always said, and if you look at throughout history, it's not always necessarily the best ideas that win. Sometimes it's the best marketing that wins. And so could we have had electric vehicles 100 years ago? Yeah, yes, we could have, right? And we didn't for a variety of reasons. So I think part of that is really what sort of drew me to the startup world is being exposed to so many interesting ideas and new innovations and applications of even old technology, but packaged in new ways, or because there's a new innovation that comes along that makes something that wasn't feasible 6 months ago or 5 years ago, whatever it may be, for that to be the case. I don't. Did you ever play the game Civilization? You ever play? It was like a
I always wanted to play it. I I I was kind of fearful that I would go so deep into it because I always heard it was such a complex game and how you kind of navigated it.
Yeah, so it was like very early in the like world building, digital gaming space. I don't even know if you could play it online. It probably was a CD-ROM that you had to put into your literally put into the computer. And so for the kids out there that don't know what that means, we'll explain that to you offline.
Or a three and a half
But
inch floppy. That's
yeah,
that's always the classic.
exactly. So, but one of the things that I always remember from that game is like you were building a civilization. The idea was to build a civilization. So you could be the Romans, or you could be the Assyrians, you could be whatever civilization you wanted to be. But there were certain things that couldn't be done until you acquired certain skill sets. You can't have a cart until you have wheels. You can't have a nuclear bomb until you have fire. So you had to go out and acquire them and conquer other civilizations and all. That was the idea of the game. And I think there's so much that's happening now. What's sort of the upside of all of the growth that's happened in the world, and this explosion and startups and creativity in that regard, is that now there are people from across the planet who are working on totally different problems, but have applications that can be combined together to duplicate their efforts, or to innovate even faster. And I think that that's an incredible thing an incredible thing to see in our lifetime, but it's really exciting to be a part of and seeing so many unique technologies coming to the forefront. Um, so to be a part of those is just, that's exciting to me.
It's probably one of the most exciting times in history, arguably. But with the speed at which everything develops, but I mean, regardless, what the internet has provided in the sense of the globalization aspect, I mean, you're right. Two people from across the world can now simultaneously work on something and build something. And I don't think we've really had that opportunity. And so when it's going so quickly, I mean, that's part of the reason why a lot of the Goat platform is sustainability, is every single area of sustainability right now is a really interesting area of innovation. You have every single piece of kind of the world coming together around this concept of how do we take care of this thing that we live on. But the facets and how the companies explore it, I think to me, that's the exciting part. And I would imagine that's kind of the same for you because going through some of waves of technology, you start to see moments that are pivotal. Is this one of the bigger pivotal moments that you've been able to see?
Oh, absolutely, without a doubt. I think what's interesting is that, to your point about sustainability, it's there's a shift in the consciousness, which has not happened overnight, right? We've had edicts regarding globalization and climate change, and we've tried to do that from a regulatory perspective over the last, I don't know, 30, 40, 50 years. And climate scientists have been, ringing the bell on this since at least the 70s, and probably even earlier than that. But the ability to innovate in that regard and have consciousness around what's the driving force and how we're building. It's not just that there's a confluence of technology that allows us to have new innovations, that those innovations can take place more rapidly, but it's what's the purpose, what's the driving force of why we're innovating, right? Maybe 40 years ago it was just the almighty dollar. It was capitalization, that which is a motivator. Great, like let's build the economy. We shouldn't scoff at that either. But the idea that we can say, how do we build this new thing in a way where it's profitable and sustainable, good for the planet, good for people, has multiple different check marks that we can assign to it that allow it to be something that's more than just bottom line driven. And so I think now more than ever, um, almost every business has to think about these things from not just a sustainability standpoint for the planet, but sustainability from a social perspective, from a cultural perspective, from a yes, from a natural perspective. I think those are all important things that businesses are thinking about. And what's great is that's not just happening at the startup level; it's happening at the corporate level too, right? So the idea that companies can say we've been doing something for 100 years. Well, now that has to change because the world around us is changing. So we have to adapt, and we have to be able to figure out how we take what we're doing, which is not good for the planet, and find ways to make it sustainable, make it something that's culturally and socially significant in that regard.
Yeah, I think one of the hard things navigating some of that, I think for corporations is that expectation of, making a bigger shift in the business and how that could impact the shareholder interest and all of that, all those kind of decisions that usually corporations have to go through. And startups are a little bit more nimble and being like, hey, let's go this way, let's go that way. It's part of the luxury of being a startup, but I think people are more accepting of that type of mentality of like, yeah, we can turn this ship and we might make mistakes, but if we're transparent in the process and we say, hey, this is where we're trying to do better. We tried this, it didn't work. Let's keep going. People are way more accepting of that than, it being perfection out of the gate. And I think that that's one of the things that always gets missed when people either, um, from a corporate standpoint, they're trying to move the company, they don't understand the time that it takes. And then from the consumer side, they don't think there's any effort getting put in on the corporate side. And that's what I always find is the interesting miscommunication and kind of where that startup fills the gap.
Sure, and I think from a timeline perspective, none of these things happen overnight. There isn't a single thing that happens, whether it's on the startup side, the corporate side. Things just take time. And while we can want, to have, carbon neutral as a goal, it's a fantastic goal to have. It's just not going to happen overnight. So we have to allow ourselves the grace to be able to say, this is going to take time. If If we think we can do this by 2030, fantastic. If it's going to be by 2035, okay, that's what it's going to be. And allow each within their space to do that. But I also think that we have to maybe broaden the definition of sustainability as far as what that means, not just from a climate or a saving the planet perspective, but more broadly, what it means for the economy, for society, right? So as an example, one of our partners has an incredible technology. It's a surface. So this surface is copper infused, and it's infused all the way through. So it's not like it's a layer on top that you just like, that like if, when the effectiveness goes away, you just strip off the top. That's not how it works. It's infused throughout the entire surface. It's good for the lifetime of the surface, and it kills most bacteria. I'm not going to give the proper disclaimer, I'm sure, on this, but something along the lines of it kills almost all bacteria within 2 hours, and most bacteria and infectious sort of transmitted things that can be on that surface within a matter of minutes. So from a sustainability standpoint, it's one surface. There's not a lot of waste that goes along with it. It's a natural resource. You can deploy it into new construction. You can refurb, and you can put it in all of the public places where you might have diseases and bacteria, et cetera, being spread, like hospitals and hotels and airports and that sort of thing. So this is the kind of thing. It's a technology. I think that all of their patents have been in place for more than 5 years, but it's but it's going to take time to adopt this. And so our strategy with this partner has been to go on all fronts, right? So we can sell this to existing buildings, existing institutions. We can also go through the regulatory channels to try to make this standard of care in particular institutions, that hospitals should adopt this, at least for overbed tables and rails, guardrails, and things of that nature. So while this isn't necessarily a company that's saving the ocean per se, or keeping forests alive, the impact that it has on the ecosystem is tremendous by reducing disease, by reducing waste associated with that. And so I think some companies need to start broadening their spectrum in terms of how they look at participating in the sustainability movement.
Yeah, I one in defining sustainability is probably one of the bigger parts of it too. Most people, it's been coined as a term because it's almost trained that we think about planet, ocean, smokestacks. That's kind of the images that usually come with sustainability. But the way that we often describe it is that it's also just efficiency. Like if your organization or your family household or whatever that structure that you're operating in can be more efficient, you have less waste or less partners or less, of a complex supply chain. And when you can do it that way, you're able to actually move the needle more than just, a carbon offset that you hope is doing the right thing. And it also creates a better business at the end of the day that you can build and scale on. And I think that that's one of the big pieces of this is looking at business models and trying to make those efficient at every point along the way. I think that to me is the more sustainable than just changing your material.
Right. And part of the challenge of that is telling that story, whether it's from the startup perspective or to corporations or to the world, of not just, it's a nice story, but when you put the cost benefit analysis together on this particular product, and this isn't the only one, we see tens, if not hundreds of these, a year of new opportunities like this, where what are the cost savings to that hospital system or to the transportation authority or whoever the regulatory body is or whoever the agency is that's responsible for that sort of thing. So okay, there's going to be a cost for us to implement, but once we've implemented, what are the cost savings? And sometimes those are a little bit difficult to understand. But as we get more data on these kinds of things, and as we better understand that economic impact, then you start to say, okay, well, now if this frees up, a few $1,000,000, let's say, in a system, where can that money go that now creates more sustainability, right? Now you create this cycle of being able to save dollars over here that can be attributed to other items over here that then, again, put us ahead of the cycle. And we see a lot of businesses like this. I'll give you another example. We have a company we've talked to. incredible founder, incredible technology, which is basically a non-plastic plastic. Same qualities as a plastic bag, but not made out of plastic, made out of completely sustainable, totally compostable material. And so we sit here today, and they're doing okay. They're a startup. They're getting going. They're on their way. But what could be 5 years from now, 10 years from now, where that maybe is the standard of care, where in states that have banned plastic bags can say, and I always forget when I travel to New York, and I forget that you go to the grocery store and they don't have plastic, they don't have bags for you. I have to. The last time I think I was in New York, I bought a. It wasn't Hello Kitty. It was another. It was some kids TV show that I had to. I'm walking around the streets of Manhattan with my bag that has like Hello Kitty or something on the side, because I forgot that they didn't have bags there. But that sort of thing where it becomes standard of care, and now, and not even just in bags, but even packaging, even things that are, you think are not so significant, but like you send a FedEx letter, right? And there's a plastic cover to keep the airway bill inside the on the outside of the package, and that's also plastic, and that also ends up in our oceans, and that also is there's billions of those packages that are sent every year. So to find those applications and be able to put them to good use is really meaningful.
Is that kind of, do you see the world differently, like as you just navigate it, whether it's when you're traveling, when you're working, when you're just going to the store, going home? Do you kind of see systems differently, like how things operate, and thinking about efficiencies along the way?
That's such a good question. Yeah, I do start to see that a lot more, particularly as I come across new technologies, and you look at something where it's just not working the right way, or you see something that's just really so outdated, and you're like, oh, if these guys only knew about this new innovation or this new technology, how much better would it be for them, or even just in as an example, I was at a concert last night, and so there were paper tickets that were handed out, and they're scanning the QR codes that were on the paper tickets, and I'm like, there's a step we can remove here. We can make this a little bit more tech friendly, but and planet friendly, right? Like printing out these tickets was also not a necessary step anymore. So I do see the world through that, and I see that through because our mandate in terms of everything that we do is not just to find good business opportunities that we can bring overseas to the GCC MENA region and to create opportunities for trade and collaboration between those markets and our markets here in the U.S. But it's to find those that have all of those angles. It has to be quality, wholesome, ethical, sustainable. All of those things are the key words that we're looking for. Innovative is great, but if it doesn't do all of those things, if it's going to be the same as what we're currently doing from a sustainability or from a climate standpoint or an efficiency standpoint, then what are we doing? What are we working so hard for? It's got to have all of those elements to it. And so when we see that stuff, it does sort of put a different perspective on travel and supply chain and logistics and packaging and food and beverage and like why can't we have a great tasting protein bar? Like we'll get there. Like there's so much happening in food chemistry where you'll have stuff where you want it to taste like Frosted Flakes, it will taste like Frosted Flakes. We're just not there yet, but we'll get there.
Yeah, 100%. And how do you start to build that, I guess, business moral compass? How do you build that in the sense of, you could maybe want to make one decision for a company or for a household or whatever that is, that says, hey, I think this is the right decision, but there's always, hey, this other company decided, no, we need to keep things going because we need to employ all our people, and that supports the livelihoods. How do you start to develop that moral compass as a company, especially in, like, if you're not a startup? Because I think that's one of the big challenges. Like, we'd like to, but systematically there's a disconnect.
Yeah, I think it's a fair question for some larger organizations that maybe have some more complexity to them, and so change is going to be slower. But I think my answer to that would be that we went through digital transformation, right? We were all using floppy disks 20 years
Well,
ago.
and I was thinking about literally
Yeah,
when you said the paper tickets to a show, I was like, I
yeah,
remember printing out maps where you
yeah.
have left turn, right turn, and you couldn't just pull it up on your phone.
Right. That was one of my bigger frustrations in my college days, visiting my grandparents on Long Island. Was before, it was the days before MapQuest and iMaps and Waze and all of the technologies. And they would tell me, go this way to get to wherever you were going, and then they'd have another opinion about which way to go. And I'm like, please just write it down. Please just, I don't want options. Just tell me the best way, whichever way you think is the best according to your definition, the safest, the cheapest, the quickest, whatever, doesn't matter much to me. But write it down on paper, because otherwise I'm not going to get there. And so yeah, so I think we all did that, and we know that there are changes that have to be made, and companies have done this in other areas as well, right? So many of the large corporations have currently employ a chief diversity officer or chief inclusion officer. That didn't happen because they all decided they wanted to do that. There was public pressure and social change that said this is an important thing for companies to be thinking about. Now, sustainability has become an important thing to think about. Transformation doesn't have to just be, we did the digital thing because that's where everybody moved to. And it didn't happen overnight. And so now you have multiple places where you're, as a corporation, going to interact with people. So it went from, you have to have a website, which nobody had prior to, I don't know, 1994, let's say, for sure before 1994. And I remember the days of, dialing up on Prodigy and AOL and hearing that fax machine sound that my kids are like, what is that? What is that? What is that sound? They don't understand it. But those were the days. And so then you had to have a website. And then not only did you have to have a website, but then there was like a new thing called an app. And you have an app too. And then you had to be on the blockchain also. And then you have to have a social presence. You've got to be you've got to be on Twitter X, and you've got to be on Facebook, and you've got to be on all these platforms. And so if it's important enough, if the markets move, if people are there, if that's where the conversation is taking place, and those are the values that are being represented, across society, then people are going to move there, and corporations are going to move there, and they're going to have to, and they might do it voluntarily, or they might do it kicking and screaming, but they're going to do it. And I think that's where we're at now, which is so exciting, is to say, okay, they're going to have a strategy when it comes to sustainability, a strategy when it comes to diversity, a strategy when it comes to globalization, supply chain, all of these things. So somebody within the organization will be tasked with those, and then it just becomes a question of sort of a values game. Which one wins? Of all of these values that we're being presented with, understanding that we're under the rubric of running a company that has to be profitable, which ones win? That's what it's going to come down to.
Mm. Do you think, I mean, where does that education side come from for the companies and I guess, the stakeholders in the companies? Because you have the shareholders to kind of educate on one side on why it's important, and then internally you have okay, here's the shift, and here's why we're making the shift internally, so we can get to point B. Where do you see that kind of mechanism working?
Yeah, I think it's incumbent upon the whole organization to sort of move in those directions, right? Like I think if you look at the early history, and there's so much access to this too, through so many great writers who are bringing to light the origin stories of corporations, which maybe wasn't so much of an interesting genre 100 years ago. Maybe it was, I don't know. But so many interesting things people want to know. There's docuseries, and there's dramatic, there's movies, there's miniseries on companies like Uber and Facebook and Theranos and companies like that, because it's interesting to hear those kinds of decisions and what happened in the boardroom, and what happened in the conversations between the VCs and the founders, et cetera, et cetera. So I think what starts to happen there is that putting those pieces together for these corporations or for startups, when you're putting those board seats, and who's going to invest in our company, and there's a due diligence process that's taking place in both directions now, that maybe wasn't happening 10 years ago. It's super important that the founders say, okay, yes, you want to put your money into our company, we're happy to have your money, but we want to know that you're mission aligned. Nobody wants dumb money anymore. If you're on our team and you're aligned with how we're going to work, then this is going to be successful. And we know that our values and the way that we interact with each other is going to push us to move in the right directions. And when those things are not aligned, that's where some of these really interesting stories do take place. But it hurts the company. It ultimately hurts that innovation. And so I think that's sort of the next step in the evolution here is to have somebody whose role in the organization for these companies, whose role and responsibilities are to say, what are we doing from a sustainability standpoint? What are we doing from a diversity standpoint? What are we doing from all of the different things that we proclaim to be valuable? Which ones are actually valuable? And we know that from their actions. We're going to know what they believe in based on what they do. So I think we'll start to see that that's a shift that's going to take place too, is more of an emphasis and a focus on those elements as these companies begin to grow and go through this change of an increased focus on sustainability.
Mm-hmm. Well, for you, when did you start as a person start kind of getting down this road of, I guess, more so on the finance side of things, like when it comes to now pulling the finance lever in order to move some of these chess pieces on the board? One, how did you start getting into that? But also, where did you kind of get that knowledge to learn it? Because it is a completely different topic than even just improving a supply chain.
Yeah. So our partners overseas are very focused. Primarily our business is focused on bringing Western business into the Islamic markets, what we would define as the GCC region, the MENA region, and the OIC, the Organization of Islamic Cooperation, the 57 Muslim majority countries. And so there's a real emphasis through our partners and through everybody we work with overseas to not just diversify the economy. Yes, we recognize that oil is a big contributor to the economies overseas. It's not just to diversify and say, okay, well, let's just bring more jobs here. Great. It's to find the innovations that are going to sustain these economies and these societies and these cultures for the next hundreds of years. And so, doing that through not just finance but through partnership and understanding how to bring those things together, it's really, this is the total puzzle. It's not just putting a couple of puzzle pieces together and now we have a corner. It's all of the puzzle pieces are here. So it's not just finding an innovative technology. We want to take that innovative technology, we want to shape what's going to work for the particular market that we're going to bring that into. We're going to bring the right local partners to the table to help further refine the opportunity, and we're going to bring the financing so that they have the fuel to continue to grow and achieve the goals that we've set forth in our shared partnership. Um, Doing that is really what I think is going to be the next level of globalization. You're going to have companies now that say it's important for us, and we can do this the same way that as technology grew, and now somebody can be working on a project in Australia and somebody can be in Seattle, Washington, and they're working on a similar problem and they can now connect with each other. Now you're going to have markets doing the same kind of thing, where we can very easily say, okay, there's a problem that's taking place in urban planning, let's say in Chicago, and Neom, the new city being built in the desert in Saudi Arabia, is dealing with some urban planning issue that's already been solved in Chicago, and now those teams can come together to develop that, to understand that. We see incredible economic development that's taking place across the seas in terms of new economic zones that are being built, and saying, okay, this area is being devoted to new technologies in the automotive space or in healthcare, logistics, supply chain, and being able to, again, marry and combine as many of those things into one area to create these innovation hubs. We see a lot of opportunity with research and development too, to bring new research and development opportunities where a company that's successful here in the US, public companies, bringing them over into overseas markets to expand their network, but also to give them a budget and a space to develop R&D that's outside of their core business. So the core business can continue to function and grow, but now we've given them the opportunity to leverage local resources to find new applications of their technology, to develop into other channels, and to grow in really significant ways. And so putting all of those pieces together has been really interesting to see come to fruition.
I mean, that's a fascinating side of it because I mean, I grew up next to Silicon Valley, and spent a lot of my time there. And one of the things that I noticed was that there's something special about that Silicon Valley area, but it's also just the collection of the people that make it that innovation hub. It's not that the buildings are really any different, or that the opportunity necessarily to bring in technology is any different. It's you have the mindset of the people wanting to innovate. And I think with just that globalization, you have all of these innovation hubs popping up kind of around the world. It's this realization that, whoa, it doesn't all have to be centralized in these few areas around the world. It can actually be distributed. And then that can bring so much more benefit to every single one of those communities along the way. And it also gives people the opportunity to do something for kind of maybe the area that they want to live in, operate in, have a family in, rather than have to go into these specific cities.
Right. So 20 years ago, or maybe 30 years ago, it was a question of how do you find the information, right? I don't even know how to find the information. I have to go to a library and all these books, and I got to be quiet. And it was a challenge to find the information that you wanted if you wanted to do something like that. And now it's not a question of finding the information. It's all out there. It's figuring out it's sifting it, right? It's figuring out what's the best information. It's how do I combine what I learned here with what I learned there or what they're doing over here to find the best solutions. So what's really cool about, I think, what's happening on that front as well is because there's such a desire to lead when it comes to innovation, everybody wants to be the next Silicon Valley. I'm here in Boca Raton. 10 years ago, they were trying to get Silicon Beach as the phrase. They were trying to dub Boca Silicon Beach.
And New York had Silicon Alley, like.
Yeah, and it didn't catch on, but South Florida has grown as an ecosystem really nicely, and part of it is just having the same people be in the same room, right? I think the story one of the, or maybe some of the investors in Uber were just they invested in Uber because they were all in a poker game together with one of the founders, right? It's just sometimes it's just being in the same room. It's having that access. It's having that ability to connect with people who have the same energy, the same desire to grow. I think this was really kind of how WeWork was born as well. It's like we're all builders. We're all trying to do cool stuff and innovate and grow. Let's do it in a community. Let's do it together. So, what's now starting to happen is that in these markets like in Dubai and in Abu Dhabi and Riyadh and Cairo and Tel Aviv and throughout the GCC MENA region, you're seeing some incredible developments and some really awesome collaboration, which I think is also unique and is starting to grow. There's always a healthy rivalry amongst the economies about who's number one and who's leading. That's always, I think, going to be there. And I think as long as it's healthy, it's good. It's good to have that. That drives those economies and it drives that innovation. But along with that comes the collaboration, which is really great to see. We work a lot in Egypt with a lot of tech talent, and the tech talent coming out of Egypt is really, really impressive. Really solid work that we're seeing coming out from some of our developers and partners that we have in the region. So we're excited to see how that's going to grow, and I think a lot of that is directly attributable to people having more access and creating bigger circles of influence and opportunity.
Yeah, I think we're moving so much more into, I mean, what I was kind of calling the age of discernment almost, because yeah, there is so much information that discerning what either the truth is and what you're looking for, or what you're really trying to solve. Like there's so many different ways you can solve a lot of problems nowadays because you have access to all the information. And this other idea that you may have a wonderful idea for a startup or a world changing idea. You are most likely not the only person on the planet thinking of the same solution. And now to have this ability to put those brains together, that's what actually moves it. Because there are so many incredible ideas throughout history that actually never made it because they didn't get the right people around the table in the right room to actually move things in the direction that it possibly could have. And now we're kind of seeing that opportunity, which I think it's exciting.
Yeah, it's the people and it's also the resources. It's easier than ever to find and collect all of the resources of what one would need to do to launch a startup, scale a startup, exit a startup. All of those things are now readily available to the general public. Here in the U.S., I say this to some people because they, when we talk about overseas markets, it's very different than the U.S. market. So here in the U.S., you could open up an LLC tomorrow, create a TikTok channel, and voila, you've got a business, right? Like it's pretty much that easy. I'm not saying it'll be a successful business, but you could build onto that. You could have a merch store, right? You could set up payment processing. You could sell coaching. You could all of those things are pretty available for someone to do pretty easily and pretty quickly. I don't know, under $100, under $1,000, whatever the number is, you could do it pretty readily, easily, quickly. In the overseas markets, everything is done from a top-down approach. We don't do anything from the bottom up. We would never just open up a company and say, here we are, come buy our wares. It just wouldn't work. We work very closely with ministries and agencies on the governmental side, on the regulatory side. So if we have a healthcare product, we're working with the Ministry of Health, we're working with the FDAs in each of these countries. And it's the same kind of conversation. We need to be in that room and have that access to be able to do the things that we want to do. And so we're having those conversations additionally with local partners, distributors, et cetera, to say, okay, here's the product. It's got IP. It's already FDA approved here in the U.S. Or it's food and beverage. It's got better health benefits than what's already in the market. It's better quality than what you're getting from other markets. Whatever the story of that particular product may be. And now, from a top-down perspective, how do we bring this to market? So we're going to get regulatory approval. We're going to have these local distributors. This is who's going to market it. This is where it's going to be sold, et cetera, et cetera. And you have to go into those markets. And that's the value really that CH Group brings to the table, is not just in bridging the gap between Western business and Islamic culture, but also in terms of structuring the whole kit and caboodle. It's what does the deal look like? How do we distribute this? Who's our partner? Who's on our team? How are we, dealing with any challenges that may arise? All of that comes into play as part of what we do. And so what's fascinating now is because so many businesses have the opportunity to not just have access to the right kind of people to grow and scale, but because they have those resources as well, so many businesses come to us a little bit more developed than they might have been, even 5 years ago, because they can accelerate it so much faster. Instead of, I don't know where to go to raise capital, I'm not sure who I should bring on as my first hire, and I don't know which platform I should use for logistics. Well, a lot of those decisions are getting made quicker and with more efficiency.
Mm-hmm. Well, and how do you start to bridge that gap in the cultural differences in how to do business? Because I think that's also one of the things that is missed in especially this more international business is kind of the cultural norms of how you're working. How do you start to bridge that?
Great, it's a great question, and I think we've discovered is that for many people in the U.S. market who would like to go into international markets, would like to expand, things are very foreign, very mystical to them about how to do business in the GCC MENA region. And what we tell them is there are a few things that you should be aware of. Number one, you should be aware of the fact that we're all people. We all like the same things. We all do the same things. We have a lot more in common than that which divides us. And so, one of the things that's been incredible in my experience is to have the ability to meet with people who've come over, visited with us, and we work hard during the day. We're at meetings. We're going out and seeing all new technologies. We're introducing them to our suppliers. We're bringing them to new opportunities. People in our distribution network and partners of ours overseas. But at night we sit down and we're going to share a meal. So when we share a meal, it's the same food we all enjoy. We're having warm pita and hummus and tabbouleh and falafel, or it's pizza. It doesn't matter what the food is. We're sitting and we're enjoying together. We're having wonderful conversation. We're learning about their culture. They're learning about our culture. We find that the way that we celebrate holidays is very similar. The way that we get together with family is very similar. So in terms of the cultural aspects, it's really more about understanding how to build the trust so that it becomes a brotherhood. Because at the end of the day, that's what it's about. If we trust you and you trust us, we can collaborate, we can interact, we can figure out how to solve the business challenges that are going to come up as opposed to relationship challenges. We find that we have very few of those in terms of building that bridge, building those relationships, understanding where everybody's coming from. Once that trust is built, it becomes very easy to say, okay, here are the few business points that need to be negotiated. And once we've gone past that, now it's like we're family. It's like we're brothers, and we're working together. We're doing business together. We're interacting together. It becomes very easy to get past that hurdle once we've gotten to that point. Um, and so what we want people to know is that it's a top-down approach. They do need to understand that you can't just walk into a market and suddenly be wildly successful, which is true of any market that you're going to go into. It's really not that different. And you have to allow for the partners to do what it is that they do. We look for world-class operators. That's who we look to partner with. If you're a world-class operator, you do what you do well. You know how to operate, you have expertise, you have know-how, you know what IP you need, you know how to operate your business. That's what we want you to concentrate and focus on. If you do that, we will be tremendously successful in our markets. We bring everything else to the table. So if it's distribution, we're going to distribute your products. We know who the distributors are. We're going to tell you how they need to market it. We're going to tell you exactly what you need. We're going to be that bridge that makes it possible to do business in that part of the world. So as long as you can operate, know, and ask questions, like we don't want people to feel that they shouldn't, just because it's mystical or foreign or different, they might have questions about what does it mean to be halal. Halal just means quality, wholesome, and ethical, which is what you were doing with your business anyhow. You're already there. So for 99.99% of the businesses out there, you already meet the standards and qualifications of being a halal certified with Circle H business. That's great. So you've already cleared that hurdle. In terms of other items, we'll walk you through any other cultural considerations that may exist in terms of having conversations with overseas partners. But as long as your products are quality, they're wholesome, they're ethical, they're going to go into the market, they're going to be sold in the market. We'll tell you exactly how all of that works. And so that's really the best way for businesses to approach it, is to say, ask the questions. If you don't understand, we understand that you don't understand. It's different. It's a little bit outside of the box for you. But we'll share with you, and you'll find that more often than not, most of the things that you think are so different are probably much more similar than you had in mind.
Mm. Well, and I think part of that process too is realizing that I think there's this expectation, especially in U.S. business, that I mean, being vertically integrated is a huge benefit, but at the same time, it's if it's not your expertise, is there an easier way of doing it? And I think that niching down is not as valued in the US as being the everything, being the I'm the online e-commerce, but I'm also the fulfillment company. And I can also do your movies and entertainment. And now suddenly you're a really successful company 100%, but you're doing so many things. Whereas some of these problems that we're trying to solve are big problems. And it's not that Amazon hasn't solved problems, for example, but it took a certain scale in order to solve the problems. And some of these problems are really big, and it takes all the focus and niching down and then lining up with the partners who are truly best at what they do as well. I mean, that's kind of the thought process of a founder. It's to get the team around you that is the absolute best at what they do in each one of those categories. And that helps the company build. I think too many people kind of give credit to one specific person in an organization. It's like, no, it's actually getting everybody in the organization around this idea and getting incredible people around the table to do it.
Right. And while they don't need to be siloed, they should be in some sense looked at as if it's a silo. My responsibility is business development. Your responsibility is marketing. Your responsibility is operations, right? There's overlap, and some people have, more of a background or skill set in more than one particular area, which is beneficial. But really, at the end of the day, you're right. We look at ourselves much the same way. We're international expansion division. That's it. That's what we do for you. Now, sometimes it's a little bit more complicated in terms of how we structure that, and it takes development. Like, again, these things don't happen overnight. We might put together an overview today that says, here's how we're going to position this company, and here's what we want to do, and here's what the opportunity is today. And sometimes those things take a long time to develop. Sometimes they happen within a matter of days or weeks. and we're ready to move those forward. We have a company right now in our pipeline. We love their technology. They're amazing, incredible founders, incredible IP, but don't really have a product yet. And so we're working with them to shape what that product would be for these markets. And it's a multi-billion-dollar impact that this particular company could have, but we want to make sure that we do it the right way. And so when we bring them into the market, it's not just to throw it against the wall, it's to make sure that when we've presented it to all of our partners, this is how we're going to do this. This is how you're going to be involved. This is how we're going to take it to market. And so I think that companies do need to start looking from that perspective to say, okay, if we can perfect what we're doing here, if we can focus solely on this niche, we're going to get this product to be, as we want to get 10% market share, whatever the goal is. We can do that here, and they can focus on that particular element of what they want to do with their business. Great. We're going to focus on how you get into our international markets. And we tell companies, if you want us to get you into Europe, that's not going to be that should not be a good goal. Our relationships are not the same as what we have in the GCC MENA region. That's what our target is, and that's what our focus is. So if your focus is elsewhere, then that's where you should focus. If you want to focus with us, that's where we can take you in and have a really incredible impact in terms of cultivating a strategy, bringing you to the market, and watching us succeed together.
Where do you see the foundational technologies being in the next few years? Because I think one of the difficult things to tell is who's breaking things quickly in order to solve problems, and sometimes in a good or a bad way. And then, who are the people who are looking at the foundational problems to build against those rather than just what the problem is right here?
Yeah, I think what's great is, to our earlier discussion on sort of the globalization and the access that people have. So, years ago, cities took on the life of their own of whatever it is that they were specializing in, right? So Silicon Valley was technology in the broad sense of the word, and Boston was biotech, and New York was fintech, and Miami was sort of the gateway to Latin America. And I think those things are still true to a certain degree, but I think what's now happening is that that doesn't have to be the case. You can be you can be a transformational technology coming out of Austin, Texas. You can be a transformational technology coming out of any city in the world, and there's no limitation to that anymore in the same way. I don't think somebody 20 years ago somebody would laugh. I would think somebody would laugh if you said, "Oh, I don't want to begrudge any city, some small city, right? We're an innovation technology coming out of some small city." And people would say, well, who are you? And what access do you have? And what rooms are you sitting in to have those kinds of conversations? Now, I think people take that seriously, and people recognize that great technology can come out of a lot of different places. Where I think you're going to see transformational technology, going back to the sustainability standpoint, is to say, we've now built this incredible infrastructure. Amazon's a great example of this, right? The infrastructure exists where people have their own businesses built on doing business just on Amazon's platform, whether that's fulfillment or brands or whatever it may be. So now we're sort of moving in, I think, in the same way that sort of blockchain views itself as like Web 3.0. And in some ways that may shake out. We'll see how that really plays out with blockchain and crypto, et cetera. But I think that that's also going to happen in a sort of an analog offline format as well, where interacting in Web 3.0, whatever that is now also going to be something that companies that are not necessarily technology companies have to adopt and say, okay, all of these values that we now hold dear, like sustainability, those now have to be part of our product roadmap, our project roadmap, our how do we incorporate those things into transformational technologies and what we do from a business perspective. I think that's sort of the next wave of what we're going to see.
Yeah, because a lot of foundational technologies right now. I mean, I think from our side, we're seeing a lot of energy, a lot of not regulatory, but going to like the blockchain idea of being able to track a lot more things, traceability of everything, and then the social aspect that's actually offline. how do we build communities a bit differently? How do we distribute food differently? How do we distribute energy differently? A lot of those foundational technologies we're finding to be kind of a lot of the topic of discussion. How do you start to look at things, I guess, as a person? How do you start to look at things as they scale? Because there's a community solution, then there's a country solution, then there's a world solution, and there's this balance between decentralization and then centralization. Where do you think that balance is?
So I'll give you an example. I think so. So I started putting together. I'm a big networking guy. I like going to networking events. My kids like when I come back with some swag from an expo and whatnot. They're always like, "Oh, more hand sanitizer, thanks." Um,
Every
but
time with the hand sanitizer.
with the little clip, and it goes on your bag, and you never know when you're going to need a little, squirt of hand sanitizer. It doesn't hurt. Yeah, but pens and chapstick and all that fun stuff. So, but I'm a big networker. I like going to networking events. Because again, you want to be in the room, you want to access, you want to meet new people who are doing innovative, interesting, cool things. So I just started sending a couple weeks ago. Just started sending out an email to 30 or 40 people nearby that I know are also avid networkers, or just moved to South Florida and they want to kind of get out and meet people. So I just put together an email, and it's about as yes, I use some technology, but it's about as analog as it could be. It's an email with a couple of links, and it takes me all of 5 minutes to put it together. Then I look at, so that's sort of like on the individual level, right? And then if you go one step above that, then there's like Meetup and Luma and some of these other platforms to be able to do that. And I think scaling something like that out is really, really challenging to do because you just get so broad, right? I have a narrow focus. So, there's a networking event here, there's a breakfast there, there's a listen to the speaker there. That's an easy kind of thing, and it's a small community here in South Florida. I think that becomes a little bit easier to navigate. So to your point on scale, I think some of those things are going to have to continue to exist in that realm. There may be some challenges that we say you could do this at scale, but it loses some of its effectiveness, or it loses some of its luster if you're trying to do an event email like that in a bigger capacity. I don't know. I think that's the kind of thing where some things do have to stay at certain stages. When it grows too big, it outlives its usefulness.
I think that's so important because that's so much of the mentality is build something to be big, and we forget about the effectiveness of something that's actually small. Like, do you want it to be big? I think there's a perfectly good opportunity for a business to have a small footprint, even a small operation, and be very, very successful. Sometimes when you scale, your either your profit margins or your materials that go in or your stress or whatever that is, there's something that does change in that balance, especially as you grow. And that's not always the best thing for either a business or a person too, is to just grow for growth's sake.
Right, right. I was part of a group during COVID. I think it was called Founders and Funders. It was a group of us that got together on Zoom Tuesday nights, 6 o'clock or whatever time it was, and it was about 20 of us when we first started, and it was just an opportunity to kind of vent, let loose from the day, and meet some people. And it started with about 20 people. We were doing it every other week, and then and there was the novelty at the beginning of COVID of everybody was on Zoom all day, anyhow, and everybody was in their house with whoever else they were with and needed just a little bit of a break, maybe from that routine, that monotony, and and eventually it grew to about 200 people with breakout rooms, and it was a real challenge to find it to have the same kind of effectiveness and excitement for it as we had at the those first couple of months. The quality of people did not diminish. It wasn't like it was there were people who shouldn't have been in those meetings. All interesting, intellectual people working on really cool problems, but it just got too big and it got unwieldy, and oh, I wanted to meet that guy, but we didn't get into a breakout room together. I wanted to meet that gal, but we didn't get into a breakout room together. And so some of those things kind of started to pop up, and it wasn't the same as it was initially. And so I do think that that's a challenge for companies. I think particularly on the sustainability side. I think also, as if your niche is in a particular area, and now you're going to try to grow to get the corporate accounts, that's a big hurdle to jump through when there may still be more of the market available to you in what's already been proven to be successful for you to go to go and grab that market share. And so again, those competing values sort of come into play, as companies begin to make those decisions.
What about on the finance side when you start to look at deploying capital? Is it you have your specialized funds that say we only invest in these certain areas for those obvious reasons. They know the pool they're playing in. You have the funds that kind of diversify their investments, and then you have some that you have your small checks, your big checks, and you kind of have those ranges. Where do you think finance is shifting? Because that's, to me, that's what's been kind of another side of this whole sustainability thing, is how finance is playing a role in these technologies, and either the scale of the technology or the interest of the funder, but also the access to be able to invest from consumers too. You have your platforms where people can actually just invest in companies now. So how does finance play a role in some of this kind of moving process?
Yeah, I think finance is an interesting area because what we'll start to see is that there has not been to date. I used the term earlier, dumb money, right? There's dumb money, there's smart money, there's strategic money, but I think there's now going to be what I would call maybe the next shift is like branded money, right? That there will be companies that now develop a reputation the same way that the early VCs, right? 25 years ago, there were 8 VC companies, whatever the number was. Now there's hundreds of VCs, and there's VCs who really are private equity companies, but masquerade as VCs, and angel investors who thankfully the availability has grown, but it's also become a little bit more ambiguous as to who does what and what really, where do they really play and what are they looking for. I think that becomes the next step, is where you have branded, very large funds dedicated to sustainability, dedicated to solving particular challenges and issues. And I think those marriages will ultimately be really fruitful as well, because you'll have that alignment, right? So the story for why people went after certain VCs is because they were the big name. Oh, you guys were involved in this big IPO. You were involved in that big IPO. That's who we want to go after, right? I don't know that they were any better, quote unquote, or worse than another firm. I don't know. I don't have enough knowledge to answer that question. But I think what you'll start to see is that the intersection of the startups and the founders that are looking to solve challenges, and the companies that are looking in the same space, those will be direct conversations and direct hits because of that branding, because of that positioning, both for the founder and startup side, but also for the investment community, to say, this is what we're interested in. These are the kind of companies we want to talk to. And they'll start to also be better about sort of discerning, is this really about sustainability or is it not? Who's really who are the players that are really committed to these values, and who are the people that are doing it because it's the trendy thing to do. I don't know if you've noticed this, but I've seen a lot of ads lately that are like, such and such brand now with AI, like, yeah, now with AI, like, it's like, the advanced formula, it's new Coke now with AI. Like, it's the trend that everybody's jumping on, which is great. Like, good, we should be using AI, we should be leveraging it, to maximize capabilities in a safe way. But for the companies that are going to say now with sustainability, are they really so focused on sustainability? I don't know.
Yeah, I think that has been probably one of the biggest challenges for us at Goat, has been the discernment of the brands, because now that it is popular, now that it is trendy, we almost don't even want to say sustainability, just because the word has almost an empty understanding to it at this point, because it's been beaten over the head of people that want to have it be trendy versus the people who are, committed to that foundational side of change. Because you could have recycled plastic that was made as plastic water bottles on the same assembly line, melted down and turned into fiber to say that it's recyclable, versus a post-consumer recycled plastic. Just even in that, you have a misunderstanding of what the ultimate objective is. And the ultimate objective of the recycled plastic industry was to take plastic waste that has already been in the waste stream and turn it into something else, not make more of something in order to label it as something else. And so, yeah, when you have that type of movement, finance gets a little bit weird too, because you have some that want to ride the hype train and others that go, no, I want to be the investor in Apple 30 years ago kind of idea of this is going to be a foundational technology that's going to change the world. And that's where we're trying to find the companies that are doing that, because to us, it's who are going to be the leaders of the next generation. We in this opportunity where I think we have a lot of not fear, but just kind of uncertainty around what the future is going to hold, whether that be AI, sustainability, economic, agriculture, whatever it is. That's always an opportunity to shift the narrative. And so you're going to have this new incoming generation of businesses that will become the new Facebooks or Metas and all of that along the way. And I think it's kind of on the finance side to pick those jockeys.
For sure. And I think, in the same way that there's a democratization that's taken place amongst the resources and assets and skills and availability for startups to grow, I think the same thing is happening, on the capital side, where, if you were to do a purity test on every, the same way that foundations, right, that the nonprofits, they can go, there's a few different scoring sites that will tell you, this foundation, for every dollar that this foundation takes in, 90 cents is spent on actually, deployed into the purpose of whatever they, their mission is, and only 10% goes towards overhead, et cetera, et cetera. So that information is readily available when it comes to nonprofits. I think that will start to happen as well on the investment side, in the investment community, where you say, okay, to do this purity test of their portfolio, you can literally go and say, okay, this fund made 10 investments. All 10 were in the sustainability space. All of them were, all of that will be made, as public as they want to make it. And there will be companies that are still on the capital side. It's always been complicated. There are companies that have a wide range of investments, and founders are going to have to say, is it acceptable for me to take money from this organization that we know is involved in something else that maybe doesn't align with our values? How do we make those kinds of decisions? But I think that you'll start to see is you'll have more, I guess, nichification of that, to say, okay, we only do sustainability, and we're only sitting in this particular box, and we're only looking at these kinds of things, and that's where our capital will be deployed. I think you can have much more value-based, not value-based investing, values-based investing, where you say we're only going to invest in things that align or are important to what's important to us. So that could be, female-founded companies. That could be underserved markets. That could be, globalization. That could be, it could be collaboration. It could be in so many different areas that I do think that will be the next evolution of capital as well.
Well, and this smart money concept of actually aligning who's investing in and the founder, I think is so much more important than people put weight on it. I mean, it's a foundational partnership decision. You want a funder to believe in the mission of the company. I think that idea of just like, here's money I want to return in 5 years, that narrative is a bit different depending on the application you're trying to do and the scale of the problem you're trying to solve. And when you have that general alignment, the mission becomes so much more fulfilled, honestly, from all angles. Like, the business becomes more successful, the returns end up being, usually higher for a company that is successful at it, because they're solving the big problem. But it all came down to that partnership between the funder and the founder to say, yeah, let's build this and we're going to get here, not we can take this IP and put it into something else real quickly and just make a ton of money off of it.
Right. I think if you look at the .com, boom, that's really what was happening. If you just went out and got a .com web address, you found people who said, "I'll throw money at that." So it could be flower.com, flowers.com, 1-800-flowers.com. You had how many different iterations on the same business that were probably all getting the same, same inventory from the same vendors, using the same web platform, using the same web developer. And there was no differentiation between any of those things. And the money that was going there was coming from people just trying to ride the wave. Now I think more than ever, the availability of that information to say, okay, there are X number of funds out there that are focused in our area. We're just going to target having that conversation with them, because that it's not just that it's smart for us, it's strategic, it's aligned, it solves so many other problems. At the end of the day, even that from a sustainability standpoint, right, in terms of turnover and in terms of the ability to move projects forward and make sure that the best innovations get to where they need to go, that helps from a sustainability standpoint too. And I think we'll start to see more of that.
What's been the biggest shift that you've seen kind of throughout your career now that you've been able to see some shifts in society? What do you think was a big foundational shift?
So, without making a political comment, because we never make a political comment, what I'll say is that, and these things also happen in baby steps. So, what's been really heartening for me, I am Jewish. Many of my partners that I work with are Muslim. We work within the Christian community here in the US as well. And so to see the collaboration that's now taking place and the interaction that's taking place amongst countries that were not, and amongst economies that were not connected to each other in any way, has been incredible to watch. So I see, just as things are happening, particularly in the Middle East, and I know it's a challenging time now, but we've seen, just as a small example. So there's a building in the United Arab Emirates called the Abrahamic House, and in the Abrahamic House there is a dedicated space for a mosque, dedicated space for a church, dedicated space for a synagogue, and people come there regularly with a museum attached to it, understanding and explaining and giving opportunity for people to explore each of these unique, not just religions, because it's not just about religion, it's the culture, right? If it was just religion, then that's one thing. But everybody has their cultural and their practices and their norms and rituals, et cetera. And so, to better understand all of those things, they created this Abrahamic house, along with the Abraham Accords, which were signed just a few years ago. And now those relations are continuing to grow. Is it bumpy sometimes? Will there be missteps? Yes, there have been. And at the same time, there's now a real burgeoning business community and collaboration community amongst those markets, where people are traveling back and forth. They have their own networking events. They have their groups that are growing, that are establishing really incredible business opportunities and collaboration amongst, and building those bridges amongst those cultures. And so what we aim to do, and I think that is the next shift. It's already happening. It's already starting, and we should only continue to live. We should continue to live in a world that continues to build peace, where we see more collaboration and more opportunities for people. And one of our catchphrases is, from people to people, place to place. It's the people. Everything in this world is about the people. So if we can help people see what's available to them, see the collaboration opportunities, the interaction opportunities, the business opportunities, the social, cultural opportunities to interact with others, that's what we want to build. And so we're very excited to be able to see where that's going to go in a world that is promoting that is looking for that is eager for collaboration amongst great technologies, people and people, places and places, technology and innovation, all of those things kind of coming together. And I think that transformation is really the next step. It's not about globalization. It's about the ability of different societies, different cultures to come together and better understand, better collaborate, better interact.
That is, yeah, to me that might be one of the most important things. because one of the gifts that I've been able to have over my career is really to take a camera in and get to know people from all different backgrounds, from all over the world, with all different beliefs and all different cultures and all different religions. And there's always, for some reason, a common ground between all of it, and this genuine enjoyment of spending time together, learning about one another, what our beliefs are, and how we became who we are as people. And there's like this positivity that's in that process that is truly awesome. And I think that the perspective that you've been taking and at CHS Group or at CH Group is this idea that you guys you're rooting everything in the positive mindset, that this is about a positive shift in a mindset of people and cultures, that hey, we can build something different, we can build something better. Let's come at this as people. And I think that that might be one of the most important things in a lot of this globalization conversation or supply chain conversation, or what does the future look like conversation. And it's in collaboration and looking at it in a positive way rather than a, oh no, what are we going to do kind of way.
Yeah, I think, my experience, I can only speak from my experience. I grew up in a Jewish community amongst many Jews, did not meet a lot of people who were not Jewish until my college experience, maybe in high school a little bit. But meeting Saeed, our CEO and founder and chairman, who's from Egypt, who's Muslim, and learning from him and with him and collaborating with him and understanding. We spend many hours just talking, not even on the business side, just understanding, talking through biblical stories, stories from the Quran, stories from the Bible, that it's this was his understanding or this is his interpretation growing up in Egypt, and understanding the story from this perspective. And oh, well, we teach it this way. Oh, well, how do you understand this particular concept? And then it opens up a whole conversation where we both have a much deeper appreciation for our backgrounds, for our culture, for understanding. And it's not a threat to either one. We're each free to practice as we practice, and we're each free to observe as we observe. But the ability to better understand from Saeed's perspective, from our partners overseas, from their perspective in terms of how they grew up and how they view the world, and what religion guides them, and what their culture and society guides them in terms of how to behave and how to act. That's an incredible thing. And really what we try to focus on with Circle H certification, which is why it's such a passionate topic for me, is the ability to provide access to the Islamic community here in the US to all sorts of products in each of the 8 economic sectors is an important thing. It's not just, and it's the 8 economic sectors are food and beverage, finance, technology and insurance, cosmetics, fashion, pharmaceuticals, healthcare, travel and tourism, and media and entertainment. So as a kosher consumer myself, it's important to me that I have access to the products that I want to have. And 40 years ago, even 60 years ago, that just wasn't readily available in the US market. And the halal market in the US is very much in that space. There where kosher was 60, 70 years ago. And so now what we want to bring to the forefront is for people to understand that by certifying your products or services just demonstrates that you're giving access and inclusion to the Islamic community, to the halal lifestyle consumer. What does it mean? It means that you're quality, you're wholesome, you're ethical. That's it. With a very simple symbol that you've seen on packaging, just like the OU. Ours is a circle with an H inside of it. Very simple. It's out of the way. It doesn't change anything about what you do. You don't have to change anything in your procedures in most of the cases of businesses that we talk to. And it provides access to a community. It makes them feel welcome. That's it. That's all we want. At the end of the day, we all want a nice warm hug of feeling welcomed by society. Then that shouldn't be too much to ask for every component of society. Even, so gluten free is accepted. Is it on every product? No, but anyone who needs to who needs to eat products that are gluten free can go to the supermarket and find a fair number of products for themselves. Uh, if not a section, right, depending on the supermarket. Non-GMO is readily available. You can go and find non-GMO products. You can find kosher products. You can find for a number of different segments. I see more and more, does made in a facility that produces tree nuts or doesn't produce tree nuts, and so people who have those sensitivities and allergies can avoid products that are harmful to them. This is the same thing. That's what we want to do, and by providing access, this is what I'm passionate about. We all want to be kind. We were all taught to be kind to our friends in elementary school, and sometimes for people, I guess that goes away as they get a little bit older. But we want to just provide access. Everybody should feel welcome and included wherever they go. Maybe that's just a novel concept for me, but that's what we want to provide. We want to provide the ability for halal lifestyle consumers to have access and included and to feel welcomed, not just in this market, but wherever they go. They should be able to find products everywhere in the world. And I really, truly believe that through that access and through the collaboration that we bring under CH Group and through Circle H, that we'll find ourselves in a more peaceful world because we have better understanding of each other. We provide greater access. We have the ability to better understand our cultures.
Well, and the halal certification is essentially, I mean, those foundational guidelines are really what we look through GOAT when we look at organizations and how they approach doing their business. Like it very much is, it's about being ethical, it's about being wholesome and really caring about one another. And it has to be quality at the end of the day. And when you can put those three things together, it's like, well, yeah, that makes sense. That's a good idea. And so I think that part of this is just about being open to, kind of a curiosity about the world, about solutions. Can we do it better? Can we do it at a higher quality? And can we do it more ethically, kind of at every point along the way? Is that kind of the secret of not just the business side, but the personal side, like just for people to get along better? Is it literally just, hey, let's shift the mindset to a little bit being more open and curious about, other ways of doing things?
Yeah, 100%. I think if you look at that historically, even in this country, right now we call it a holiday party, but 50 years ago, that's not what it was called, right? And that's okay. This country is a majority Christian country. It was called a Christmas party because it was a Christmas party, and maybe there were a few Jews that were there, and maybe there were a few Muslims that were there, and maybe there were a few, Hindus, and maybe there were people who didn't celebrate Christmas who were joining in that Christmas party. And that's evolved over time in this country because the population has changed and because we want to provide that inclusivity. It doesn't take away from you if I want to celebrate my holiday. It doesn't take away from me if you want to celebrate your holiday. You have the space to do that. I want to have the space to be able to do that. And I truly believe that by providing that space and that inclusivity and access, my kids, we keep kosher. So when we go to the supermarket, if they see the symbol that says it's kosher, then they're very excited on that. Oh, I can get this product, I can get this candy, I can get this, and if it's not there, it's not even a question. They understand, oh, it's not accessible to me. That's okay. They get it. But everybody should have options. Everybody should have choice. Everybody should have the ability to go, and it's not just in their supermarket. It should be when it comes to their travel, when it comes to their healthcare, when it comes to cosmetics, fashion, all of the different areas of quality, wholesome, and ethical halal lifestyle, that those choices should be available to people rather than this is the only option and we have to settle for it, or there's no option. And so now we have to find a workaround to keep our beliefs, to keep our practices. So that's our belief, is that by doing that, by providing that access, I really do believe that we'll see a world where people have a better understanding for each other. People have better ability to interact in that way because they understand. Oh, you can't do this. I can't do this. You can't do this. This is what we can do together. So let's do that. Let's come to terms, and we'll do what's comfortable for you, comfortable for me, and everybody will be happy.
Yeah, I mean, making it accessible, I think is important because you need that, the ability for people to have choice in that process. Like even early stages of sustainable related products. I mean, there still is this case a lot, but there was a huge price difference between the more sustainable option and the one that would serve the same purpose that had a different way of approaching things. And you can't blame anybody for choosing one over the other because you're like, well, you have the choice. You don't have the access and the ability to just be able to free choose which one's going to be the better product. And I think that more of that transparency around why brands are doing something or the intention around why they're doing something, I think then the market starts to have that more accessible choice to say, I will choose this brand because it is of quality, it is this higher ethical standard. And when you can start to filter the products and kind of gauge them, I think you give people a better opportunity to make a decision. Because I often say a lot of times that, none of these brands that we would put in the bad category of businesses, I highly doubt any of them go, yeah, let's destroy the planet. Let's make things worse. Like, it's never usually like the intention. It's the byproduct. And so when people are given more choice and more just put it out on the table, well, the best one will probably end up winning at the end.
Yeah, for sure. We see this very much as a tipping point. One of the conversations we had about a year ago was with a large company. They have about 760 products. About 750 of them are kosher certified. There were a few that they couldn't kosher certified, and they've been kosher certified for decades. And we had a very nice, warm conversation with them and said, here's what we don't understand. All of your products could be certified halal. Certainly the ones that are already kosher certified, that's an easy process. You've already gone through that process. We could certify those for you, and now you open up to a market that's about the same size as the kosher consumers here in the US. But it also opens you up globally to the 2 billion Muslims who follow our certification. They follow the religious leaders on our council. About 95% of the global population follows our leaders in our council. So you're opening up to a population of about 2 billion people. And the process, you're familiar with it because you've gone through it for kosher certification. It's about the same. And the pricing is about the same. So you're not going to have to raise prices. You're not going to have to change your products. There's no big upheaval to what you're doing from a business perspective. You're not going to price yourself out of the market. You're going to provide access in a meaningful way without having to disrupt anything in your business. So why wouldn't you go ahead and get certified? And so we're at the tipping point of that conversation because to our earlier conversation on sustainability, it's a value. Once it became a value and people became conscious of it, that's when people started saying, what's our sustainability policy? How do we approach these particular issues as it relates to our business? This is another value that I think should be embraced by everybody. The idea that your product is as widely available to people, it should not be a difficult concept.
Right. Should it be a tangible the shift, is it more of a tangible result conversation of saying, 'cause if you were to make a decision in your business, whether it be, let's just call it packaging, you want to redo your packaging, there's a cost that goes with that, whether you have to change the machinery, is it more expensive materials, and what's the payback on that? So, like, does it need to be a tangible, hey, in 5 years you'll probably see like a shift then, off of this investment? Or is it the tipping point where it becomes seamless, where you don't have to switch your machinery and it's literally just put the thing in? Or is it business dependent? Because that's what we've been trying to kind of discuss and try and solve, is where's that tipping point? Is it a tangible or seamless?
Right. So for 99% of the businesses out there, it's seamless. Do what you're already doing. You don't have to change a single thing. You're going to get certified with us. You don't have to change your policies. You don't have to change your procedures. You don't have to change your equipment. Almost, and that's true for 99% of the businesses out there. There will be some businesses where there's an ingredient maybe that they're using that is not acceptable, and they would have to change something like that. But and particularly if a business is already kosher certified, that's very easy for us to do. For other businesses, even if it's not, we never want a business to come from that perspective. Those are good questions that they'll ask, right? Not just what is halal, but what's it going to do for my business, or how is it going to change my business? So we look at it very much like there is an ROI. We can figure this out for you. There's about 5 million halal lifestyle consumers in the US market. I don't know what the ROI is. I don't know what you're going to convert. I have no idea how that will affect your business. What I do know is that the price of certification is the same as what you're doing for the kosher consumer, and you're definitely getting an ROI there. I don't know how big or how little that is, but you can tell us what that
But
is.
you're sticking with it, so therefore there must be some sort of benefit.
Yeah, you've done this for the last 5 years, 10 years, 100 years, whatever it is. And right, there's a benefit to you. If you can quantify it there, I can tell you that it's going to be about the same for the halal lifestyle consumer as well, without factoring in any international expansion, distribution. The fact that our Circle H certification is global, it's good wherever you go, accepted everywhere on the planet. So once you're certified, it's one and done with us. And now you can take your product and say, okay, we know there's a sizable community that we want to sell this product to in Europe or in Australia or wherever, what other markets you may be in. Great. So now go and market there. Now you can go and take that and you leverage that as an access point, as an ability to have that conversation with that particular community. To the point of democratization that we're talking about as well, so much of marketing is going in that direction too. You're not going to offend anyone if you run a kosher campaign. We want to target the kosher consumers out there, and we run a particular ad for the kosher community, and one particular to the non-GMO community, and one particular to the halal community. You can do that, and you can segment it in a way. Nobody who's a follower of the brand is going to be offended that you decided to market so you can sell more of your products. Nobody's offended by it. So we see that as a real opportunity to say, okay, we can create another niche that we weren't so active in or that we weren't providing access into. We get certified, and now we're able to market into a different community than we were doing before. And there will be a real ROI to that. We can't tell you what that will be, but you probably have the data that would say, if we're doing this, we've been doing it successfully for this community, it's going to be similar results for this
Mm-hmm. Well, and having it be a seamless onboarding process just in general with any solution, I think that's so important because when you're actually making a transition, like we for example, we're looking at, what do certifications look like in sustainability, and how does that usually work? And inside companies, they usually have to hire somebody or take somebody who's doing one job to then spend most of their time on a certification specifically. And not all companies can do that, or are willing to hire somebody else for a specific role. But when it's seamless, they go, okay, yeah, this kind of makes sense, just a business shift. What do you think is the big challenge, though, that either companies or individuals are just facing in making a transition? Is it purely the financial squeeze? Is it worth the, I know some see it as a PR boost, right? Do they go, is it worth the PR boost? Others see it as a foundational business shift. Where's that hard part of getting people to kind of tip over?
It's a great question. So we see when we talk to a business that gets it right away and has one decision maker, right? So they're the chief bottle washer and they're making all the marketing decisions and they're responsible for quality control. Then you're talking to all the departments at the same time. That's as seamless as it comes. They get it from all perspectives, right? When you're talking to a little bit of a bigger organization, who's who are you actually having that initial conversation with? If it's with the CEO or the president or vice president and it's a top down kind of conversation, great, but you still need buy in from QC, right? From whoever's, how many facilities do you have? How many different facilities need to be inspected if you're producing, physical products? There's a marketing conversation that needs to be had. There's the operations conversation that needs to be had. So it does become a little bit more of a challenge when you're having that conversation along different competing departments of a particular company. Having said that, again, I think what we really try to aim to do is make it as seamless as possible. Is to say, here are all the answers for the quality control department or for the people who manage the facilities. We're going to make this as seamless as possible for you. In many cases, we can do those inspections via video walkthrough. So you're comfortable and familiar with having to do walkthroughs in person and live with ISO or whatever other standards and accreditation agencies certify your facilities. So you know that that's part of the process. We're going to make this easy for you. We can do those in 15 minutes, half an hour, whatever it may be, to walk through your facility with our counsel and our certification team and make sure that we answer any of your questions regarding that component of certification. In terms of marketing and sales and positioning, we give some resources and we have many conversations about how to do that. Ultimately, it's the company's responsibility, but we partner with them to say, here's, we have market research we can share with you. We have knowledge on where those communities are and how to reach out and how to provide access. From a financial perspective, same kind of thing. It's in line with kosher. It's in line with other certifications and accreditations that you would get. And you'll find that there is a potential for a very significant and quick ROI for a cost that's going to open up, a really nice market for you. It's going to provide access to that whole market for you. So there does exist a challenge when it comes to having those conversations, but I think we do a pretty good job of making it as seamless as possible.
Yeah, definitely. And what's kind of been your favorite part of kind of solving this problem? Because now you've had the opportunity to solve a few business problems on the chessboard, so to speak. What's been the most exciting part about this one? Or no, just in solving kind of the halal certification, but more so overarching what CH Group does. Just what's been the most fun part for you?
Awesome. Yeah. So I used the analogy of the puzzle pieces before, but for CH Group, I really use the analogy of building a house. So we've built some incredible infrastructure over the last number of years, and it's a house that's being built on two sides of the pond, as it were. So you've got building that's taking place overseas and building that's taking place here in the U.S. to develop the business operations, the infrastructure, the partnerships, all of that stuff. So that's incredible from a historical perspective for me to see when I came on board in 2020 to see what we've built and what's been established, and now what things are already, the foundation's been laid. We've got bricks now that are being put into place. The piping is there. All of this stuff is starting to come together in a really meaningful way where certification certainly has a benefit here in the US, but it's also a prerequisite for doing business in that part of the world. So we have certification as the gateway, as the passport doing business in the GCC MENA region. We have a distribution network and team of over 200 people overseas establishing these pipelines and distribution networks for products and services in all of these different areas. We have our council that provides, the cultural and social support. We have top-down relationships with the agencies, the ministries, the sovereign wealth funds, the family offices, et cetera, overseas. All of those pieces have now come together to build that side of the house. And now we're doing a really good job of building this side of the house here in the US to now build more of a bridge to have more opportunity that we can bring over into that market in new and exciting and different areas. So it's not just our 8 sectors, but we have opportunities in energy. We have opportunities in real estate. We're in giga projects, in commodities, in startups and accelerators. We have an interesting biotech start accelerator that we're involved in overseas. We've now started to build a pipeline of opportunities coming from Latin America through a strategic partnership that's been in development for a while to bring more opportunities globally, not just here from the US, to develop our business development network here in the US of new partners and new collaborators that can bring unique opportunities and continue to build both sides of the house.
That's a really really cool way that you explained it to that you guys are building it, because I think that the house concept, it all comes down to the foundation on those homes. And I think in this case the foundation is built upon this idea of let's connect the world, and let's do it through a lens that is about helping people and building communities better. And then let's pull the levers that we can in all the different areas, get the best people together and do it. Like I think that's the coolest way that you can kind of affect change from the bottom up, and building the foundation the way you guys have, I think is really cool.
One of the awesome things for me is that because it's such a big addressable market, and because we have so many different collaborators and partners and deal flow and exciting and unique opportunities that come across our desk, we have sometimes ideas that we didn't have the right operator 2 years ago, or we developed a concept and it wasn't quite ready. Wasn't fully baked. We couldn't really get it exactly where we wanted it to go. So we put it in the cooler for a little bit, and sometimes once we meet the right kind of operator, or we get connected to somebody and we say, oh, you know what, let me dust off this idea for you, and what do you think about it, and how could we develop this concept together, because you're an operator that could take the ball with this and run. And so from time to time that happens too, and it's really exciting to see something that we're like, we thought that was an opportunity, that was a great idea, and it just didn't really get to where it needed to go. But now we can revive it. Now we can bring it back. Or now, because we've developed additional infrastructure or new partners, we can bring it to them and say, okay, guys, we talked about this 3 years ago, but the timing wasn't right, or we didn't really understand exactly how this would work within the market. And now we do. Now we have the right partner here. Now we have the right operator, and we can bring that back into the fold. That's also exciting to me, because then we can say, all of that time spent to develop this concept, let's get it moving down the line.
Yeah, timing is so crucial, and way too often it just gets put on in the cooler, but kind of in the back corner of the cooler, where it's like, you know what, let's just completely forget about that it was even a thing. But a lot of ideas, it do come down to timing. Is it the right time for the market to either understand it, purchase it, build it? Do you know the right people? And some of the great ideas just were a little bit too early. I mean, you mentioned EVs earlier. Yeah, they've been around quite a long time. But maybe it just wasn't the time, and for other reasons that, maybe went into that. But the idea was that the timing has to be right for a lot of these things. And maybe that's a lesson to founders and or investors. Sometimes those back burner ideas, there's a time to move those to the front burner. And once you can recognize the timing, I think that's also a really powerful position to be in.
Yeah, and I think sometimes those pieces that would make it viable are not readily available today. But when they do become available, then it becomes the right opportunity, the right time to pounce. And your point is well taken, that the timing of it is what's most important. I've heard commentary that the fax machine set us back like 40 years from a technology perspective, because it was sort of a step back, but everybody got so used to using fax machines and that technology, that it affected how quickly we moved to email, which is obviously a far superior technology. And then maybe something comes along that's way better than email. But certainly we have text messages and WhatsApp and so many forms of communication. But that the fax machine, because of when it came along and because of how popular it became, it sort of set us back a little bit.
That's so interesting, because yeah, you think about, I mean, fax machines were always, yeah, quite, I'll say, inconvenient, but at the same time there was this magic that you could somehow just get this document out the other end and went, wow, my goodness, that just went over the airwaves, cool.
All that
And
information, and it got there
yeah,
without smudging on the machine, and it didn't come through all garbled. Wow, unbelievable.
yep, it's like that idea, the cell phone camera, that it was, Philippe Kahn basically was, one of my original business mentors, was heavily involved with this company and Philippe Kahn and stuff, and this idea that, hey, I want to send an emailed photo of my newborn to my friends over email, which was quite new. And it was like, well, could I send a photo? Well, let's engineer a way to do it. And I think that a lot of that came from, yeah, that idea of fax, send something instantly over the airwaves and you could do something. So yeah, in the moment, of course, setback, you're like, oh, this thing. But at the same time, it was giving, kind of laying down the pathway to kind of do something even deeper.
Sure. Yeah. So that stuff fascinates me in terms of those decisions from a historical perspective, and things that we think we're so convinced is the latest and greatest, and sometimes is not. One of the best books I read over the last couple of years is "But What If We're Wrong" by Chuck Klosterman. I don't know if you're familiar with the book. Chuck is a well-known author. Has written for Rolling Stone and Grantland and some other publications. And one of the topics that he covers is this idea that we're so convinced, I think he calls it casual certitude, of how we really believe today that what we know is like, we're not going to learn more than that, or what's settled truth today will always be that settled truth. And so I think one of the things he talks about um, is gravity, what the prevailing thought was on gravity pre Isaac Newton. And one of the things I think he says, Aristotle thought that gravity was rocks trying to get back to their family. That was the prevailing thought on what gravity was. And maybe there's some truth to that too. Maybe it's sort of cyclical, and that becomes the truth of what it is. And then obviously we have better understanding. But the book really explores, will we have the same knowledge of gravity 500 years from now? Today, will we have the same beliefs, understanding, thoughts about what gravity is? And maybe we do. Maybe we know everything there is to know, but there are certain things that we may not know all there is to know. And the reality of what that truth is 500 years from now will be very different. So the ability to find new technologies that shake what we believe, or change transformatively what we can do and what we believe and how we understand and how we interact, being at the intersection of all those things is just it's what I love to do, and it's really exciting to be able to do that for CH Group.
Do you think there's a speed at which we should develop? And what I mean by that is, you look at Moore's law, for example, exponential growth. Truly incredible what it's been able to do for computing. I kind of think we're on a similar path, not identical, but similar path to the way that we solve problems using that technology, whether that's deep space research, whether that's nuclear energy, whether that's new materials. We're almost using that growth curve of technology in Moore's law to also innovate on problems. But, to your point, if we think that the current solution is the best one, what if we're wrong? Is there a fork in the road where it could go more one direction versus the other, good versus bad, and that we go down a path too far, and it's purely because of our rate of innovation rather than the innovation itself?
I think so. I think what we've seen is social media is probably a good example for this. Social media innovated so quickly and had such deep science behind how how to engage the consumer that we got into a world where we're now overconsumed on social media, and where there are, groups from all sides of the aisle indicating that they would like to create regulation to curtail social media use for children. That there should be more studies to understand how it's being put to use, and what's healthy usage, et cetera. We're just at the forefront of that, right? We're just starting to learn all of those things, and so, you know, perhaps if there was a law, 15 years ago that said you can use your phone 5 hours a day, and only 15 minutes of that can be used for social media. Nobody was clamoring for that 10, 15 years ago. We became addicted to our technology, to our phones, to social media societally. And so, I think that we're going down that road as far as social media is concerned. And I think we'll start to see that maybe there are groups that formulate out of that, right? That where we say, okay, well, there's going to be people who just log off completely, or people who say we need an alternative that's healthier, or whatever it may be. You're going to have maybe more choice and option in the marketplace as far as that's concerned. But I think as far as innovation goes, I don't think you can have too much of it. I think where people are innovating is great. I think the challenge is who wins. The challenge is how do people stay viable and provide a solution, even if it's not the biggest or the most widely known, but is available. I think there are still people on MySpace, by the way. Like, I think it's still out there, right? So if you liked MySpace, I think it's still there. People still use Craigslist and love Craigslist and everything that it does. There are many competitors that do exactly what Craigslist does, but they're familiar with the platform. It's easy to use, whatever it may be. They like that it looks like it's nostalgic for them because it looks like, the whole internet from 2002. Um, but that's still there. So if there's innovation that's still out there, I guess my lament would be that we want to make sure that good innovation stays in the race, stays available to people, so that good innovation doesn't get burned by bad VC money, or by competitors that outstrip them, outgrow them, and then they have to crash and burn. We want to make sure, I guess, that all innovation becomes available, so that the best solutions and the best choices and options are available in the marketplace to continue to advance society.
I also think good innovation comes down to a patient urgency to go about solving problems. And I think a little bit of that is like, there's the move fast, break things quickly in Silicon Valley, which I think to a certain extent, especially with software, works really well. But when big foundational stuff, you can't move as quickly, but the idea is like, let's move as quickly as we can while still operating under this, like, let's be a little bit patient about this. I think if people adopted that a little bit more, specifically with foundational stuff, I think you'd see more collaboration rather than, I mean, competition, I believe is good. I think it's what drives the market forward. I always love like the idea of Microsoft and Apple kind of actually fighting back in the day, because Microsoft kind of kept Apple going because they realized that competition was important. So that is important, but at the same time, competition just for competition's sake doesn't always lead to the right decisions. And so that's where I think navigating it is the hard part.
The beauty for me is all of my goals are super long term, right? The ability to bridge Western business with Islamic culture, to bring the Islamic markets to the US, to bring the US markets to the Islamic markets. These are things that are going to take a long time. Everything about what we do is a long game. Now, some things need to move quickly in order for us to do that. But I think when we look back 10 years, 20, 30 years from now, and we say, wow, look at all of the opportunities that were brought into the region, the job creation, the collaboration, the collegiality that we've created as a result of our efforts, that to me far outstrips whatever money we're going to make doing that. And I think when you have founders that are committed to that principle and saying, my mission is so critical that whether I become a billionaire or I have to give my company to somebody else to make this a reality, I'm so committed to making sure that that happens. That's where the great innovation is going to come from. And that's where, we hope that will continue to grow.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it is that commitment to the growth. And I think also having the understanding that it will, yeah, it'll take a bit of time, but we'll get there, and having that broader vision long term, and then kind of stepping back to what are the benchmarks to get there? What's the multi-term goal? Where do we see the world going? And then how do we just mindfully get there? I think that's the exciting part about it. It's where I find the excitement of what we're doing at Goater, all these companies that, we see them grow over the years, and there's true foundational growth and change in the market, and to watch things start to unfold, it's exciting, as I would imagine it is for your end. And I think we also forget that technology isn't that old. Like, technology itself, the idea of new technology is not that goes really far back, but the idea that modern technology that we rely on, mostly, call it the internet, it's not that old. And so when we start to look at, what does 20, 30 years look like? Our rate of growth in 20 years has been absolutely crazy. 10 years even has been wild. What can it look like in 20 or 30? That's where I think you can get some really cool ideas and start to get to work on them. And then that 30-year goal becomes actually achievable, rather than seeing something crazy in 5 years and knowing that it'd be, a huge roll of the dice to get there.
Yeah. And I think sustainability is the same thing, right? As a concept, fairly new in terms of how the world looks at the world. And so how does the definition of sustainability, I'm curious to hear your thoughts. How does the definition of sustainability change over the next 20, 30 years as some of these goals get implemented and some of the changes in behavior gets implemented? What does that look like down the road for you?
So for us, that's actually been, that's what we were discussing a lot of last year, is like, how do we define this problem? How is it going to change? How's it going to shift over the years? And we decided to define it under a framework of intentionality, circularity, and community, because we believe that if you zoom out from sustainability in terms of just a manufacturing problem or an energy problem or an agriculture problem, most of the time, whenever you have any problem, you look at it as, why are we solving this? What is the intention around solving it? What benefit will it have at the end? First, you look at it through that. And then you go, okay, well, how are we going to get this done? What are all the parties involved, and how does it kind of make a circle in terms of whatever that supply chain is, whether it be a decision or a product or, a government, who knows? And then who's the community that it's going to affect specifically from this action? And that has to do with the longevity of something, the life cycle of either a product or a community's a generation, for example, could be a life cycle. How do we think about the community? If you frame everything through intentionality, circularity, and community, all problems in the world can get solved. But when you skip one of those steps, you're missing kind of a crucial piece to the puzzle to have it grow in a way that can have it sustain. And I think that sustainability isn't just about planet. It's about us being able to sustain either our way of living or a better way of living or a new way of doing something. It's how do we sustain things, and that's how we kind of define it. And so we've shifted that definition because we think that as problems in sustainability change and shift over 5, 6, 7 years. I mean, our hope is in 10 years, sustainability is not even a word. It's business. Like what we're talking about now is just normal business in 10 years. And then there'll be another thing. But how do we frame solving the problem? And that's how we kind of frame everything, because it makes it so much more simple in not only how we evaluate ideas, but also how we execute on them too. It just makes it so much more clear rather than this really ambiguous, confusing concept that I think we're all faced with in sustainability, where nobody actually knows what it is. Nobody knows what to do. They don't know if buying an EV or a gas powered car is better, whether recycled material is better than not sustainable material, or the $8,000 Omega watch versus the $20 Timex watch. Nobody knows really what the answer is to that. And so if you just simplify it with definitions, makes it a little bit easier.
Nice. I think that's right. And I think, having that competition, to your point about Apple and Microsoft, having that competition will start to weed out where we say, okay, this is the technology that really is demonstrably, provably better for the environment. This is the one that we can continue to recycle the parts through of what we're doing here. So there's less usage, there's less waste with this particular, opportunity. So yeah, I think that's right.
Yeah. Awesome. And where where on the planet is your favorite place to enjoy nature?
Ooh, that's a good question. You know, I, I'll tell you that I'll get a little personal here. I'm not the biggest fan of my feet. I don't think I have very attractive feet, and I don't particularly like the feeling of sand between my toes. But I do enjoy getting to the beach. We're about 10 minutes from the beach here in sunny South Florida. And just going to the beach and taking a walk on the beach, hearing the waves crashing, and just kind of that's kind of like my one place that I like to. That's my getaway. Like to just be at the beach for a little bit. When the kids were younger, they're running around, they're doing their thing, they're having a good time. But now, like to just that's like peace, that's tranquility, that's where I like to be, even with the other things that are maybe a little bit of a nuisance. That's my go-to.
Oh, I love that. I mean, it's interesting that you don't like sand between your feet, yet the beach is the place. So, I mean, that's pretty awesome.
Yeah, definitely taking that little, foot shower, foot bath, when you're leaving the public beach it's an important part of leaving. But being there, just being there and kind of laying out and taking a moment to be, just quiet, silence. That's the part that I enjoy.
Yeah, the sound of the waves. I mean, I was lucky enough to grow up next to the ocean, and when you have the sound wave machines and all that kind of stuff where it's like, hey, go to sleep, listen to the sound of the waves. There's something about the quality of actually being there where you feel the wave kind of through the body, like the depth of the bass of that. No speaker can actually replicate, and for some reason it's so calming. I always found just like being kind of near the sea, it being such a calming experience. So I'd love that you mentioned that, because I mean that for me that's been a huge thing, is just that calmness that comes along with it.
Yeah, like I'm not a big boating guy. I don't go out in the water a whole lot, but like just to being there. And I think there's probably some connection as well between that sound and sort of the timing of the waves crashing with your own breath and how that's calming as well. I think you combine all of those things together. It's a good place to just kind of clear the mind, you know, take a step back, be with nature, relax. That's where I like to be.
Yeah. I think that's a good reminder that we can all go after something with a lot of intensity and excitement and focus, but we all need that reset. We need that time to be able to kind of reconnect with nature. I think it's always a really good reminder for the body and the mind to refocus things.
Totally. What's your go-to? Where do you go?
I jump in the water in the sea, so I live a couple minutes from it. And went down in the water this morning. Good, and you just watch kind of the world wake up a little bit. It's invigorating. I do a lot of open water swimming, so that gives me just time in the water, and it's been a huge way to balance things out, but it also allows the mind to process a lot of the thoughts, because especially in this world, I mean, you get so many different thoughts, ideas, and things. You kind of need to let them marinate a little bit. And for me, the swimming and that time of just hopping in the water is such a good disconnection.
Yeah, that's a great place to be, to really just be one with your thoughts and get the stuff
100%.
out that you need to get out. Hey, let's work through this. What's this idea? It's a nice place to have a little bit of solitude.
Yep, 100%. So how can people get in touch with you, get involved with you guys? What does that look like?
Yeah, so there's two sides of what we do. You can certainly check out chgroupus.com. That's everything about CH Group, our company, and everything that we're doing from an international distribution and partnership, international expansion side. So it's chgroupus.com. And then we have our Circle H International website, which is circleinternational.org. That's everything that there is to know about halal certification, Circle H certification, etc. Best way to get a hold of me is I can give out my email. You're okay with that, right?
Yeah. If you're okay with it, sure.
It's an easy one. It's uri@chgroupus.com. uri@chgroupus.com. Feel free to email me. I'm happy to answer any questions and explore opportunities. Love to see great innovative ideas and opportunities that we can bring to our markets and throughout the world.
Awesome. Yuri, thank you for taking the time and diving into everything that you guys are doing. I think it's important, and more important than I think people realize. And it's kind of one of those things where I would imagine a lot of this is behind the scenes kind of stuff. And then the public kind of, interacts with it, and that's where the excitement is. But what you guys are doing foundationally is huge. And so thanks for doing just what you do.
No, thank you for your time, and we appreciate everything that you're doing at Sustainable Goat, and love to see what we can do together to continue to make a more sustainable world.
Thank you so much for listening to the GOAT podcast. You are the reason why we exist and why we show up every single day.
I've spent too many years being against stuff, and I've found now that it's a little bit easier and a little bit more fun to be for something.
How are we going to power the world? How are we going to build the world? How are we going to feed the world?
Company isn't just good or bad, black or white. Usually there's a lot more there, a lot more that I don't know.
It's actually about what you do in your daily life every day can make a huge difference.
Give this episode a share. Join our GOAT community, but most importantly, go spend some time in nature, because you might find it a meaningful reminder of the amazing place that we get to call home. I'm Steve Cassingham, and we'll see you next time.